All right. Well, looks like most of us are here. Good morning and welcome. My name is Yulia Houston, and I'm the coordinator here of College and Academic Counseling. And it is my pleasure to welcome everybody to 2013 IMSA College Day. IMSA College Day always coincides with the college search process our juniors begin in the spring. And every spring, the IMSA College and Academic Counselors have the tremendous task of opening our students' minds and hearts to the incredible, exciting diversity of college options. And every year, we implore our students to be audacious in college search. We tell them that as long as their four-year college experience has two ingredients, academic rigor and a sense of personal joy, they will be comfortable and confident at any setting. So, how do we ensure that our powerful college counseling message to students is persuasive? We meet with our juniors, we meet with families in June, and we also organize a college day. And we have a very fine tradition of inviting a keynote speaker to start our college day. And I want to assure you that we choose our keynote speakers very wisely. When I first told my IMSA colleagues that I would like to invite the Dean of Admissions from Purdue University, I got this response. Her school is in the wrong state. Meaning that we have our own Big Ten in our own backyard. However, I had three great reasons to invite Pamela Horne, who is the Associate Vice Provost for Enrollment Management and Dean of Admissions at Purdue University. First, Pamela's Big Ten happens to be in a state that is not broke, or not broke yet. So therefore, Purdue University not only admits highly achieving students, but also rewards their in-state residents with generous scholarships, an unheard of practice at our own Big Ten in our own backyard. I invited Pam so she can meet impressive Illinois juniors and reward them handsomely as well next fall when they become Purdue freshman applicants. I brought some Purdue IMSA statistics to share with you this morning, and last year, in 2011, actually, 15 IMSA seniors were admitted to Purdue, and no one enrolled. Last year, we had 22 admits and only one student enrolled. This year, we have 11 admitted students, and since this is not May 1st yet, we do not know how many students will enroll. So I look forward to the day when IMSA students will not only be applying to Purdue, but also attaining it by dozens. I also invited Pam because I truly admire her tireless pursuit of higher educational causes. Pamela is known in the world of college admissions as a dean who is very passionate about establishing rigorous high school graduation requirements and college readiness testing. She advocates tirelessly about reducing the gap between college aspiration and preparation and about involving parents in the college admission process. This brings me to my final reason to why I invited Pam to speak to you today. I always thought of myself as a dynamic speaker until I met Pam several years ago at the College Board Conference. I don't remember the topic of Pam's speech, but I do remember thinking, this is the first time I have listened to the Dean of Admissions who speaks like a parent. Both Pam's daughters are college graduates now, so she has gone through the very same process upon which she will embark today. And now it is with great pleasure that I introduce to you the 2013 IMSA College Day keynote speaker, who is much more dynamic than I am, Pamela Horne of Purdue University.
Wow, I've never had such a fun introduction. Thank you so much, Yulia. Now, I also feel like I've been totally set up because I don't know what these expectations are going to be, but I can tell you my expectation looking forward to this today is that I'm just thrilled to be here. I've been familiar with your school for so many years, and I should mention that I am really a Big Ten person. I'm a Purdue person, but I worked at the University of Michigan for 20 years, and then I was director of admissions at Michigan State for 4 years before I went to Purdue 7 years ago. So I do love the Big Ten, and I love Illinois as well. But yes, certainly when many of our Illinois families, and by the way, Illinois is the second largest feeder into Purdue University. California is the third these days, but certainly have many conversations with our Illinois families about, gosh, if I just lived 20 miles away, then couldn't I pay in-state tuition? But such as it is. But I'll talk a little bit about scholarships too. And one thing I should say really quickly, though, while we're talking about affordability, our new president, who some of you may have heard of, who was our former governor, Mitch Daniels, just froze tuition at Purdue. For this year, we're going to have the exact same tuition rates for the next 2 years. So we're really taking a very close look at affordability, and Purdue is not unique in that regard. But anyway, back to you. You're such a special group of students and a very special group of parents. These parents have already been through a big transition that most of your peers who have students in high schools haven't been. So I'm not going to talk a whole lot about what it's like to leave home, because the students in this room and the families in this room already know about that. But I do want to congratulate the students on your accomplishments that have led to your enrollment here, and also congratulate and honor the parents who have provided a foundation and support that have really let you spread your wings at a pretty young age. You wouldn't be here without the support and encouragement that they've given you. So think about it. It's not quite May 1, but let's pretend that it is. 12 months from today, every single junior in this room is going to know where you're going to be going to college. Just 12 months from today. Just 15 months from today, guess what? You're going to be moving into that residence hall. You're going to be meeting new people. You'll be starting class at your college or university. So it's going to happen very, very quickly. And this next year is going to just zoom by. So how are you going to get from here to there? I'm going to spend about 20, 30 minutes talking about the pathways in the process. I'll give you a little inside look into the admissions process, and I hope I'll challenge a few myths and notions as well. And fair warning, as Yulia hinted, I do tell stories now and then, and I'll probably tell stories on my kids. None of you know them. They're not here to roll their eyes, and I may even tell the truth about them. So let's start a little bit with some of the myths and realities. First of all, I really encourage you to not get caught up into the hype. You have amazing counselors here. You have an amazing support system. You really need to keep this in perspective, because you're going to get the help that you need to make wise decisions and to get through the process. There are a lot of people out there, whether they're websites, books, you name it, who are trying to make a buck on the college admissions process. I liken it a lot to the wedding business. My oldest daughter just got married last October, and we pretty much managed to avoid the wedding industrial complex and didn't really get caught up in it. She's a little bit older. They were mature. They made their own choices. The wedding planner did everything because I didn't have time to, and it was fine. But you think about the hype around weddings. How many reality TV shows are there? You spend more time worrying about the chair covers than you do about what? The marriage and the relationship. And that's really what I want you to remember about college. It's not about, for the parents who are in here have been married a long time, it's not about the wedding day, is it? It's about the relationship, it's about the match, it's about the marriage. Same thing for college. It's not about the day that admission packet arrives, which is actually an old-fashioned notion. It's not about the day that you go online and check your admission status. It really isn't. It's about the match, it's about the marriage, and it's not about the bumper sticker either. You can have a really attractive partner who perhaps other people really wanted. Maybe that person's not a good match for you. And so keep that in mind. That's one of my metaphors, is the wedding metaphor. Your success as a college student really depends on not only that fit, but how you engage with a particular institution. So you can go to a big name brand, you really can, and not engage with that institution, and you're probably in some ways wasting some money, and you're not going to get out of that same education. Perhaps you attended another kind of institution, maybe not as big a brand name, maybe not as highly ranked, but you found ways to connect with faculty, to connect with other students, to make a big contribution. Some of this is the big fish, little pond kind of thing, but it's a little more complex than that. It's finding the institution that really is a good fit for what your interests are, your curiosities, and a place where not only the college or university is going to make a difference for you, but where you might make a difference for that particular academic community. And when I get to it, that's in large part what we're looking for in the admissions process. I also have a very, very strong belief that the college search and admissions process is an important step in young adult development. It's all about self-discovery. And it's also about figuring out what's right for me, not necessarily what's right for my roommate, for the folks down the hall, for my classmates, for my neighbors back home. It's really about what's right for me. And I'll give you a quote from the late Steve Jobs, the founder of Apple. And he talked about dogma. And he says, "Don't be trapped by dogma, which is living with the results of other people's thinking. Don't let the noise of others' opinions drown out your own inner voice." So students, I really hope over this next year through this search process that you're also really listening to your own inner voice and thinking about what's really right for you. But there is this trifecta of the school, the parents, and the students who are involved in this, and it's very important to flesh out what those particular roles are going to be over this next year. But students, it is your responsibility, not mom and dad, not your counselor. It's your responsibility to keep track of deadlines, to ask the questions, and to really own this process. And for your counselors and for your parents to be your coaches and your support folks during that process. And particularly when you visit in campuses, when you're actually been admitted or during the question phase that you might have about the application process, students own that. It is actually possible at a college information session for students to ask the questions and not the parents. How many of you have been on visits yet? Probably a lot of, and who does all the asking of questions, right? It's mom and dad. I can't tell you how excited it makes us when it's a student who asks the question. I can't tell you how excited it makes us when we get an email from a student or a phone call from a student, because 9 times out of 10, we love you parents, but you're not the ones who we're going to be engaged with for the next 4 years. You're not the ones whose admission we're really talking about. So students, please own the process. And a little bit about that for the parents. And again, for this particular group of parents, you've already done a large part of letting go. But, you know, it's true for the last 10 or 15 years or so, parents of my generation, the baby boomers, and now the Gen X parents, have been characterized as helicopter parents, hovering, swooping down and rescuing, making sure that their students don't ever have any disappointments in life, never suffer any traumas, etc. But I'm going to give you another flight metaphor, because you think about it, it's really important that parents and even our counselors serve as flight coaches during this next year, that you're by their side, you're helping them, giving them advice and information. But at some point, just like someone who's going through pilot school, students have to take over the controls. Because again, just 12 months from now, just 15 months from now, the students are going to be flying solo. So remember the flight metaphor, remember the wedding metaphor. Those are my 2 metaphors for this. So when you're thinking about sorting through all the options, I'd say start with yourself. I know you're getting buried with mail. I know you're getting buried with email. And by the way, students, if you go on YouTube, which I'm sure you never do, but when you go on YouTube, if you do a search on too much college mail or something like that, there's an hysterical video of some guy who's talented like you, who I think at the end of the summer, between his junior and senior year, actually put all of his college mail on the home scale, and the stack was about like this. At some point it falls over, and then you also see his computer screen and his inbox for all the email that he's getting as well. It's really quite funny. So I encourage you to take a look at that. So you are getting a lot of mail, you're getting a lot of information from colleges. So how do you sort through all of that? First of all, I encourage you, when you do get some of that mail, take a look at a few schools you've never heard of. There might be something interesting there. Click on some websites and take a look. But most important, first, think about yourself. What are the kinds of things that really matter to you? Do you want to be at an institution where there are lots of folks like you in terms of background, in terms of academic interests, where you can really focus in on particular areas? Or do you want to be in a place that's incredibly diverse, including people from all over the country, all over the world, people who have a wide range of academic interests? Are you a self-starter? Are you independent? Or are you kind of reserved? Maybe you need people to sort of come to you and say, gosh, do you need some help right now? So think about that. Some institutions are better for self-starters. Some institutions are better for those students who might need a little bit more care and personal attention, especially during the first year. And of course, academic offerings and excellence are going to be your number one consideration, but there are going to be things that will be important to you outside of the classroom as well. Think about the type of community that you'd like to live in for the next 4 years. And that would include not only the campus community, but the surrounding community. There are wonderful colleges. I'll give you a quick example that may be geographically isolated, but are just brilliant and dynamic communities. One of my nieces went to Oberlin. Oberlin's kind of in the middle of nowhere, an hour from Cleveland, and it is the middle of nowhere. When she went there a few years ago, there were hardly even any restaurants or coffee shops. But let me tell you, she and her classmates, dynamic. You're talking eyes on fire. Lots of scientists there as well as the musicians that you would expect. And the students made their own community. They had their own energy. They had their own organizations, activities, concerts, obviously, with the conservatory. Truly dynamic environment, even though, no, if you really wanted to go clothes shopping, Oberlin probably wasn't the place to go, but a dynamic campus community. My oldest daughter went to GW in downtown DC. She toured all of the DC schools when she was a sophomore in high school, knew she wanted a city, and guess what? Amazingly, even American and Georgetown were too far out as far as she was concerned. So she chose GW, which, if you've ever been there, does not have a blade of grass on the entire campus, which is great. On the other hand, the thousands of students that I welcome to Michigan State love the fact that it's big, green, gardens everywhere, found a lot of serenity in that, and that there was a nice downtown right across the street from the campus. Kids that I knew in Ann Arbor, on the other hand, absolutely loved the fact that the town and the campus are completely intertwined with each other. So lots of different choices, but you need to try the community on for size. That includes the campus as well as the surrounding. And I'd really encourage you to not make a campus choice based on weather. You're all hardy Midwesterners anyway, right? We know how to deal with this stuff. So I'm just always shocked when we recruit in California, Texas, Florida. Oh, I just don't know if I can handle the weather. And I'm thinking, really, for 4 years? Come to the Midwest. We have 4 seasons. Someday, right, or more. Yes, we get snow in April. Woo. We know how to deal with floods, but I would, this could be a great time to explore a different part of the country, not a permanent commitment. But seriously, you're great students. You don't need to pick a place based on weather. If it works out that it has a beach, that's great too. But who knows? What's really important, though, is the mission, the culture, and really thinking about the makeup of the student body. That's what really matters. And of course, and I know your counselors have probably already told you this, but I want to emphasize this to the parents. At this point in the search, don't eliminate a college or university based on sticker price. Okay, you really do not know what kind of financial aid may be available, so this isn't the time to eliminate on sticker price. But I will give you a little bit of heads up about public universities, and we'll get into merit scholarships in a little bit. But public universities in general, for those of you who will have financial need, are not going to be able to provide a great deal of need-based financial aid for out-of-state students. Sometimes many private universities do that because, of course, they're going to treat their in-state and out-of-state students in the same way when it comes to need-based aid. But that's just a little bit about public universities. If you go online and look at net price calculators, which every college and university in the country now has, you will see evidence of that for the public universities. None of us are unique in that regard, so just keep that in mind. That doesn't mean, though, that there might not be some merit offers. So don't, at this point, even eliminate some out-of-state public universities, if that's the kind of institution that you're interested in. Students, when you're digging into the search, if you can't make visits and you're looking at websites, go beyond the admissions page, go beyond the .edu main page, try to poke around, find student organizations online, go directly to the academic departments in the programs that you might be interested, read the campus newspaper online. Find out what students are writing about, what they're interested in, what's happening, what are the cultural and social events on campus, what are the controversies on campus. Sports, obviously, you could get there too, but take a look at the online campus newspapers. But the best way, of course, to find out about colleges and universities is to visit, and I'm glad to see some of you have already done that. It's the best way, for sure, to try on a few different types of campuses, and I'd encourage you to do that. We're very fortunate in the Midwest, close by. In all of our states, we have outstanding Big Ten universities. We have regional public universities. We have large and very well-known private universities, and we have small liberal arts colleges as well. So take advantage of being in the Chicagoland area, or when you go home this summer to other parts of the state, to visit different kinds of campuses and try them on for size. I'll tell you about my second daughter. She was kind of shy. She was also young. Some of you may be young for your grade. She'd kind of skipped kindergarten. So she had just turned 17 when she graduated from high school. So when she was doing the college search, she was 15 and 16. And gotta say, in some ways, she wasn't necessarily ready for it. So mom's thinking, oh, a small liberal arts college would be the best place for Jenny. And so I couldn't, in some ways, didn't want to go on the junior year spring break college visit. But her dad took her. And so they visited. She was also musically inclined, very good math and science student. So Oberlin was one of the places that we picked out. She visited Lawrence, she visited St. Olaf, and we had friends or close relatives at each of those. And then I thought, well, the music and the science and all that. And so for some reason she ended up at Indiana University as well. This is when we lived in Michigan. But anyway, and so my husband took her on the trip. Well, she wouldn't even stay for the tour at Oberlin, even though her cousin had had a fabulous experience there. Lawrence, she was like, St. Olaf, we had a very close family friend who was attending. They rolled out the red carpet, took her out to lunch, blah, blah, blah. Again, students who had close friends of ours had wonderful experiences at all three places. And then my husband takes her to IU, and he called me and he said, oh, she suddenly became alive. That it was just she needed to walk on that Big Ten campus, and suddenly her eyes opened up, they got bright, and she had that visceral kind of reaction, in the same way that her sister had had that same kind of reaction when she stepped foot on GW's campus. Now, interestingly, Jenny ended up going to Northwestern, but yeah. I mean, said she had some nice choices and she was very lucky, which is kind of interesting because in some way Northwestern is a little bit in between Michigan and IU and the small liberal arts colleges. But anyway, she had a great experience and of course is going to spend the rest of her life in Chicago. So to pay attention to that inner voice when you visit. Most students do have that gut reaction and it's important. When you're visiting, parents, please let your student try to plan accordingly. It's hard to cram 3 or 4 colleges in one day. 2 is possible in the Midwest, but 3 or 4 gets kind of confusing and you're pressed too much for time. Parents say, John, you go take a walk. Sally, you go take a walk. We're going to sit here and have coffee because I really believe students should walk around by themselves. After the formal tour, take 15 or 30 minutes and just walk around, maybe go sit and talk to some students who are hanging out. They'll be happy to talk to you. But you need to try on the campus for size all by yourself. When my oldest daughter toured GW when she was in that process, I had a professional colleague at GW that I wanted to see, and we went to the admissions presentation, and then I said, and my older daughter, I'm sure this is not true for any of the young women or men in this audience, but she had a little bit of attitude in high school, and she was already kind of, with me sitting next to her in the admissions presentation. So I said, Emily, why don't you go on the tour by yourself? I'm going to go see so-and-so in the union. She said, okay, fine. And she was gone. And I swear that's one of the reasons she ended up there was because I didn't go on the tour with her. But anyway. And interestingly, she ended up being a tour guide herself and actually did interviews for people in the admissions office. She's no longer in the business, but for a while there, I thought maybe she was going to follow in my footsteps. Sit in on classes if you can, and here's another little hint. In addition to picking up the student newspaper and reading, look at the bulletin boards. What kinds of things are posted on the bulletin boards on that campus? What's happening? What do people seem to be caring about? Who are the lecturers that are coming in, the concerts? What are student organizations up to, et cetera? And be sure and ask the questions that aren't easily answered on websites. So things like, how easy is it to change majors? How easy is it to double major? What are the minors that are available? Asking about undergraduate research and when can you get into that? Are there opportunities for first-year students? And if so, how do I go about finding those? Or do I have to wait until I'm in my major in my junior year, find a faculty member on my own? Service learning can be incredibly engaging. Some of you may have heard about at Purdue and about 100 other campuses around the world, a program called EPICS, which is a credit-bearing program where students join in interdisciplinary teams and actually do service projects that involve engineering, because of course engineering is something that helps everybody. Everything in this room was engineered at some point. But that's an amazing experience where engineering students join with business students, join sometimes with design students, marketing students, sometimes even those in the social sciences as they're assessing what the needs are. So look for those kinds of opportunities that are truly engaging. And ask about first-year studies as well. You want to find opportunities to work in teams as quickly as possible. You want to find opportunities to work with faculty as quickly as possible as well. And again, remember, it's the partnership, not the bumper sticker. It's also, and I know this is a close and tight community, it's not a competition, and I think it's really important to respect each other's privacy. If someone does not want to share their SAT scores, say, okay. It's really not anybody else's business. And parents, it's really not your business to share your kids' SAT scores at church or synagogue or at the country club. That's your student's privacy. That's your student's own business. But what's most important, particularly in a tight community like this, is as you go through the process next year, and particularly at the end of the day in February through April, when students are hearing their decisions and making their final choices, rejoice in each other's choices. Congratulate each other and rejoice that everyone's going to be where they need to be. So as you're narrowing down what should your goal be for your application set, this is going to be something that you'll talk about with your counselors, but please make it a reasonable number. Applying to more Ivy League schools does not give you any better chance of getting into any one of them. It may feel that way, but it's actually really not true. By and large, anywhere from 4 to 8 applications should be ample. I know many of you will probably go over 10. And if you're really talented and admissible to all of those, honestly, if you go over 10 applications, you're just delaying the inevitable decisions that you're going to have to make. And for those of you who will be dealing with regular decision, you don't even get those decisions until March, you're going to have to make a lot of decisions very, very quickly. So I'd encourage you to do as much narrowing down as you can with your application set. And of course, you want to work with your counselors, with your parents, to ensure that there are at least a couple of schools in that set that are probably a pretty sure bet for your admissibility. But you want to also make sure that those where it's a pretty sure bet for your admissibility are places where you can be really comfortable and happy attending. Don't apply to a school just to see if you can get in. Don't apply to a school that you can't see yourself attending. So all of your choices can be first choices for you. I had a colleague, and I'm not going to name any names, but he had a job like mine at another institution, and his son was very, very talented, went to a wonderful school in the Chicagoland area, I won't name it, and my friend got so caught, even though he was in the business, got so caught up in the hype around his son's application. And he talked about packaging him. I was just like, no, don't say that. Students are people, they're not packages. And then he talked about, as they went around and visited, that his son actually didn't like Harvard. You know, that's okay. Harvard isn't for everybody. He didn't feel comfortable there. He felt really comfortable at MIT. He did not feel comfortable at Harvard. His dad told me, well, I'm going to make sure he applies to Harvard anyway, because even if he doesn't want to go there, it would be cool to get in. And I'm thinking, really? So, don't play that game. If you visit Harvard and you're thinking, no, I don't think this is a place for me, don't bother to do the application. Waste of your time, waste of Harvard's time. So, in Couple things about different sorts of admissions processes, and again, your counselors will help you with this. So this is more for the parents. If you haven't been through this process, it can be kind of confusing. So first of all, rolling admissions. Lots of schools in the Midwest, most public universities, but not all, and fewer every year in the Big Ten, but there are still some who do it. Practice rolling admission. In general, applications for admission for all types will be available on August 1st. With rolling admission schools, sometimes the decisions start to be rendered as early as September. So IU, for example, Indiana practices rolling admissions. Michigan State does as well. You could have an admissions decision in hand by the end of September if you apply in August. So that's the way rolling admissions works, and it continues throughout the admissions season. Early action. This is something Purdue is moving to. We've kind of been moving in that direction, where you apply by a certain deadline and then you're guaranteed a decision on a certain date. Most early action deadlines are usually around November 1st. That's going to be ours for next year. And U of I, Illinois, sort of practices something like that with their 2 deadlines and 2 release dates. The way Purdue is doing early action and the way some other schools do is that we don't release any decisions until December 13th. If you have a complete application available by November 1st, we guarantee you a decision on December 13th. But after December 13th, we continue to render decisions every day. So that's kind of how early action works. And there's no obligation on your part to attend a school that for which you have applied early action. There are a few institutions that practice what's called early action single choice. We just do this to drive you all crazy. But early action single choice is I think only private universities, mostly on the East Coast, where it's not a binding application if you're admitted, but what they're saying is you can only apply to one early program. You can apply to other rolling admission schools, but you can only apply to one early program. So that's relatively rare, but it's out there. And then there's early decision. My oldest daughter was the early decision poster child. As I said, she fell in love with GW when she was a sophomore in high school. It was the only place she wanted to go. She had some backups, and she knew that, but that was for her. And then, fortunately, lucky for her, she got in early decision. Her sister, all over the map. She did not make her college choice decision until April 30th. She's the kind of student that drives people like me crazy. So different options for different students, but don't pick a school for early just to pick a school for early, but that's how it works. And don't wait until the last minute to apply. It's going to cause you undue stress, and it can, and even worse than that, it can lead to some careless errors. So the essay questions for the Common Application were posted, I think, about a month ago. They're right there on the Common App website, so you can start writing those. Many other institutions that have their own essay questions will post them online over the summer, so that's how you could spend your summer vacation, is writing your essays. So parts of the application and how we look at them, real quick. Transcript. We never really look at the GPA at the bottom of the transcript and say, oh, this tells us everything we need to know about the student. No, we look at the transcript in detail. We look at the grades in core academic courses. We look at the trend in those grades. So in some cases, for you, especially for a school like this, you had a transition between your first and second years, right? You came into a very, very rigorous environment. So if we see a little dip in grades between your freshman and sophomore years, we're going to understand that. If we start to see dips in the junior year, though, we're like, not so good. So trend in grades is something that's also very important. And we also look at the context of the school. We know, for example, that this is a very rigorous environment. Test scores. Couple of nitty-gritty things on test scores. If you really, really care, how do colleges use these? Do we use best sitting? Do we mix and match sub-scores and all of that? If you go to the College Board, there is a website that will answer those questions for you by institution. In general, though, so that you don't drive yourself crazy, trust us to use your test scores in a reasonable way. Send all your sittings to every place you're applying, and then you won't have to worry about it. And I really recommend that you do that. There truly is no preference between the SAT and the ACT. However, most institutions will require the writing part of the ACT, so keep that in mind. And take advantage of free score reports. I know it's super scary to think, oh my gosh, Purdue is going to have my test scores and I'm not going to know what they are. until the same time Purdue finds out. But there's no reason to fear that. There really isn't. So save a few bucks and take advantage of the free score reports at the time that you register. In terms of how we use test scores, I always tell the story about, I have a real good friend, Gordon Stanley, who was my predecessor as director of admissions at Michigan State, and he's now actually a counselor at an independent school in Atlanta. But Gordon always used to say, test scores matter less than parents and students think they do, and they matter more than college admissions people want to admit. It's pretty much true. We do pay attention to test scores. We don't live and die by them. And when we see what I call a mismatch between test scores and grades, I'm going to put more weight on what you've accomplished over 3 or 4 years than I am on what you accomplished on a Saturday morning for 3 hours. Okay? So if there's a mismatch and you have really high test scores and not so good grades, I'm going to think, standardized test scores can frequently underestimate someone's potential and ability, but they rarely overestimate it. So I'm going to think, did that student really apply themselves? Did they really work hard? Because, wow, look at this potential. Look at this brain power, but it doesn't seem to have been manifested in the classroom. So that's one of the ways we look at it. In terms of activities and leadership, we do pay attention. Obviously, the more selective the institution, the more those kinds of things are going to matter. So keep that in mind. In general, though, we're looking for activities and leadership that have led to a depth of experience, not necessarily the well-rounded student. We're looking to build a well-rounded class. The most dreaded part of the application, right? The essay that everyone worries and procrastinates about. But really, this is our opportunity to get to know you beyond the numbers. So please do take care of it and take advantage of this opportunity for us to get to know you as a person, as a scholar, as a growing and developing person. First of all, answer the question that's being asked. I know that sounds silly, but sometimes we'll get these statements that may be lovely, but we're like, that's not what we asked. In general, these are Pam's essay tips. In general, unless you've got something really unusual, unique to say, I would avoid the travel narratives, the life-changing sports injuries, and the mission trips. We get a lot of those. Try to find another story to tell us. That's just my tip. And whatever story you decide to tell us, be analytical and not narrative. Northwestern used to say that explicitly on their application, and I love that. And what I mean by that is, if you go on, I'll use this example, if you go on a choir trip to Europe, okay, I don't want a travelogue about that. What I would rather hear is, what was it like to travel with a group of your peers? How did you get to know them in different kinds of ways? How did you experience perhaps music differently in Europe than you have in this country? How did you look back on our country as you met Europeans? And did you have a different kind of perspective? So be analytical. What did you learn from that experience? How did you grow or change? That's what we want to know. Because what we want you to do is we want to capture our imagination so that we can see you as a contributing and exciting and engaged member of our community. Recommendations, ask folks now. It's bad enough to wait till the last minute to do your application. It's really bad to ask somebody to write a recommendation for you at the last minute. So don't procrastinate. Work with your counselors on who those folks might be. And here's a surprise and delight moment. After someone writes a recommendation letter for you, send them a thank you note. That would be very well thought of. It's another opportunity for us to get to know you beyond the numbers. Recommendations from your counselor, from a teacher, are very, very important to us. Not so important are recommendations from employers. And what could inflate your file and possibly raise some eyebrows would be recommendations from political figures, alumni donors, even clergy, and believe it or not, occasionally we see a letter of recommendation from parents. We don't need those. I'm going to tell this is some inside baseball here, but my good buddy Ted Spencer, who's the executive director of admissions at the University of Michigan. Ted used to be my boss, and he's wonderful. If you ever have a chance to hear Ted speak, he's much funnier than I am. But Ted once used to say, this isn't very nice, but it's true, the thicker the file, the thicker the student. So don't pad your application, okay? Interviews, it varies by schools. Some schools will do interviews on site. I'll tell you, the Big Ten universities we can't do that. 30,000 applications, we're not going to be doing interviews in our office. A lot of schools do have alumni interviews, and you should take advantage of those. In general, interviews are going to be a tipping point kind of situation. You want to present your best self. If they're available, I encourage you to do that. Oh, and some schools are doing Skype interviews these days too. So if they're available and a part of the process, take advantage of that. But for most schools, they're not required. Demonstrated interest is something that some schools are taking into consideration. That means you visited us, you've signed up on our website for something, you've told us, yeah, this is school I'm really thinking about. If the first time we ever hear from you is your application, you never visit during your senior year, then we might wonder, really, do they really care? So at some schools, and again, the more selective demonstrated interest is a bit of that, but don't go overboard. The admissions reps that you're going to meet in a few minutes, you certainly can engage with them, send them emails, et cetera, but they have other friends besides you. And by the way, don't friend them on Facebook. So what are we looking for and how are these decisions made? I took my staff a couple weeks ago to the admission movie, the Tina Fey, Paul Rudd movie. Has anybody seen it? It's okay, yeah. It's so-so, right, as a movie. But I have to tell you, we were in stitches because a lot of it was actually pretty reasonably accurate. So if you want to see it, or wait till it's on Netflix, it'll be cheaper. But it was kind of fun, and be sure and pay attention to the whiteboard toward the end. It was really hysterical for us. But I always say the word mission is in admissions. Okay? The mission of the institution has an awful lot to do with how admissions decisions are made. We don't stack kids up in GPA and test score order and draw a line. There are some less selective institutions who do that, but we're trying to put an academic community together that will reflect and take advantage of the mission of our institution. And the more selective, as I mentioned, the more the non-academic factors are going to be taken into consideration. And I give you a real quick example of a small liberal arts college where you can get a great science education. My younger daughter's best friend went to Kalamazoo College, and she's a scientist. She studied chemistry there, but she got scholarships, are you ready for this, for voice and French horn. Because Kalamazoo College needs to make sure, it's a small place, wonderful place, small place, they need to make sure they have enough French horns for the orchestra. They need to make sure they have good sopranos in the choir. So even though she was a scientist, she got scholarships, and her admission was contingent upon those other kinds of attributes, not just her scholarly attributes that she brought to the table. And by the way, Kalamazoo College undergrad, she is now a PhD student in biochemistry at the University of Michigan. So yes, small liberal arts colleges can lead to outstanding careers in science. So keep that in mind as well. And even though for those schools that admit fewer than 20, fewer than 15, these days the handful of schools that admit fewer than 10% of their applicants, it's not very predictable. You can take a look at the academic profile of the students and see, okay, do I have a shot? Work on that with your counselors, but know that your admission there is not very predictable. On the other hand, I always tell students, if you don't apply, you can't be admitted. So hint, when you're talking to the reps today, don't ask them to make hypothetical admissions decisions on the spot, okay? It's kind of tacky, so don't do that. Real quick, I'm going to talk about scholarships, and then we're not going to have a whole lot of time for questions since we got a late start. This is another inside baseball story. Merit scholarships, and to a certain, well, merit scholarships are less about you than they are about the institution, okay? I know that's hard to believe. A couple other things about scholarships. We award scholarships based, again, on our mission and our strategic enrollment goals. We don't sit in our office and say, wow, it's our job to reward everybody for what they did in high school. No, it's my job to put a community of scholars together for Purdue, and I apply my merit scholarship dollars strategically in order to do that. Also, in terms of merit scholarships, and again, I know there are many talented students in this room, but across the country, 75% of juniors and their parents believe that they will get merit scholarships, 75%. And do you know how many do nationwide? Less than 20. So the notion that there are gazillions of merit scholarships out there and that you will get full rides, of which, by the way, there aren't very many out there, may be overinflated. So please keep that in mind and be realistic. Also, when it comes time after you've received your financial aid package and whatever scholarships have been received, before you call and fax offers from other institutions, find out if the institution negotiates or not. Most public universities will not negotiate. So you're kind of wasting your efforts, as are they. So that's something else to keep in mind. Something real quick also about money is please don't be scared about the hype about student debt. Many of the national stories are quite exaggerated. Nationwide, the average debt upon completion of a bachelor's degree is about $26,000. Okay, that's average. Every student's experiences are going to be different. But a good rule of thumb, if you're going to be taking out loans, is the total student debt should not exceed what you expect your first year salary to be. Okay, so if you expect your first year salary to be $40,000, $50,000 or more, then taking out that amount of debt is probably reasonable. However, if you're planning on going to professional or graduate school and will incur more expenses, you probably want to be more conservative when it looks at debt. So something else to talk about with your counselors. So I think that's about it. Again, college choice isn't about purchasing the bumper sticker for the back of mom's car. It's about that matching environment that's going to be the best for you. I wish all of you the very best in your college search process. I know you'll be extremely successful. And we have a little, can we go a little bit past? Okay.
10 minutes.
Okay. I didn't know if we started late, we could go past. So I'm happy to take some questions.
Any questions? We have 10 minutes for questions and answers.
Parents, you can ask questions. It's okay. And students. Yes, sir.
You mentioned the merit scholarship. That was helpful. I went on to a university. There's a whole list of scholarships of various types. Do they all get funneled through the admission office, or are they independent?
That was the question was about when you go to a college website and you see a long list of scholarships, do they go through the admissions office or not? That is a very important question to ask when you go on college visits or send the admissions office an email if it's not clear. In many cases, scholarships will be awarded based on the credentials that are in the admissions application. And that's all you need to do is apply for admission, but generally by a certain deadline. In some cases, there may be a separate scholarship application. That's becoming less common these days as more institutions have added essay questions about leadership and activities to their applications. We're generally making merit scholarship decisions based on applications. For some of the highest awards, and I've experienced this at all the places that I've worked, the very highest awards when, 4 or 10 people are considered for a full ride, there might be interviews involved, there might be campus visits involved. And for those of you who might be looking at Michigan State, it's not unique, but it's really special. Students are invited to what's called the Alumni Distinguished Scholarship Weekend. They take a general test. And that test is a part of the scholarship selection. A lot of schools don't do that, but it's a really strong tradition at Michigan State, and it's kind of cool. So read the fine print is what I would say, and make sure that you follow the deadlines too. More questions?
More questions?
Oh, come on. I was told this would be a lively group. Yes?
Being an admissions counselor, how important do you think the fact of that we went to IMSA or something?
Oh, good question. The question was, how important is it that you went to IMSA as opposed to your local school? Honestly, very important. We really do take the strength of a high school into consideration. This school is known by every selective university in the country. It just is. So it is important. And if you're looking at schools that are admitting 10, 15% of their applicants, again, it's a whole other ballgame. But for some place like Purdue that is not quite that not anywhere near that selective, we admit about 60% of the students who apply. We know that a B from this school is well earned. Does that answer your question? Okay. Yes. Question was about choosing a major. That's a really good question. First of all, as you're visiting various institutions. In some places, you're not even encouraged to declare a major at the time of application. Others you are. In general, for those of you who are looking at engineering, that's a decision you need to make pretty quickly, because even at smaller institutions, they will want to know that you're applying to engineering, and generally speaking, the engineering curriculum is going to start the freshman year. So if that's what you're really interested in, that's a decision that you need to be made. In general, though, if you're more oriented toward the sciences or toward the social sciences, at most places you can express a preference for a particular major, but you may not be admitted per se to that major right away, and it probably won't make a big difference in the admissions decision. For those universities that have separate colleges of engineering, engineering decisions are handled differently from liberal arts decisions. And like on test scores, we may pay more careful attention for science and engineering, even quantitative business-oriented majors, say to the math subscore. So it does make a difference. If you're not ready, though, to declare a major at the time of application, by and large, that's going to be okay. And engineering would be the one that I would say, because it's also, if you start at a four-year institution and you don't start into engineering as a freshman, you could get into it. You might end up on the 5-year plan, though. And you don't want the 5-year plan. Yeah. Oh, wow, big question. Can you apply for multiple scholarships, and what are the amounts? Well, the amounts are going to vary all the way from, we used to have book scholarships at Michigan State, I don't know if they still do, for $500, all the way to full rides, which could be worth $45,000, $50,000, $60,000 a year. So there's no set amounts. Again, the college websites will probably have some degree of clarity on that. There are some institutions who you will know in advance what kind of scholarship you get, because they have published numerical criteria. You have this GPA, you have this test score, you're going to get this kind of money. Most of us don't do that anymore, because we apply that holistic review where we look at the entire student beyond the numbers, even more so to our scholarship selections. So we're looking at the essays, we're looking at the recommendations, we're looking at the match between the student and the academic program they're interested in, and it's an even more selective process than it is for admissions. So in terms of applying for more than one, it depends on the institution. Is there a separate scholarship application, or is it just the admissions application that's considered? You're just going to have to check that out. But in general, once you're admitted, you're going to be considered for the range of scholarships that are available. And for some that have extra special selection criteria, those few that I talked about, you don't need to call them, they'll call you. If you are one who would be competitive for those programs, they're going to be in touch with you. And then certainly, of course, and your counseling office can help with this, continue to apply for as many private scholarships as you can, obviously. There are a lot out there. It's a myth that there are millions of dollars that are going begging out there. That's not really true, but it certainly can apply to as many private scholarships as you can. And now's the time to be researching those. This time next year will be too late. Yes, is there yes, go ahead.
What would you say is the biggest mistake that most students and parents make in the process of
Probably not listening to the student's inner voice and letting the cacophony of all of the voices of the media, voices of the neighbors, even voices of some of your peers here get in the way of what's right for you. Anything? Oh, okay, hi. I can't hear you. Oh, the question was about early decision and how it affects your chances for admission. You know, the data are actually a little misleading. It is true that for the schools that practice early decision, of the applicants who apply for early decision versus the applicants who apply for regular decision, a greater proportion of the early decision applicants will always be admitted. And there are some institutions that will fill as much as 30, 40, 50% of their class with early decision. It's to the institution's advantage. Those students are locked in. They'll have a really good idea of how many more students they need to admit during regular decision. But that doesn't mean that the qualifications of those students who are admitted early decision are all that much different than the students in regular decision. But there's an advantage to early decision. I don't practice it at my institution, but when you think about student success, if someone really wants to be in an environment and you're that excited about it, they're likely to be successful. So early decision isn't just an enrollment gimmick for the institutions, and it's not just a way for students to have a leg up in the process. It is actually part of the matching process. But if you're not like my older daughter and know in your heart this is where I really want to be, then don't do early decision. If you found a place where this seems like a dream for me and it's a good financial fit, because you don't always know how to spend financially in your daughter, then go ahead and apply a decision. You like my younger daughter? IU, Northwestern, Michigan, early decision, not a good option. So, yeah, that's
Okay, last question, and then we need to move on.
About the community service for volunteer, how important to apply for the mission of school?
Okay, the question was about community service volunteer activities. Whatever has been meaningful would be great. We don't need to have you list every single time you worked at the soup kitchen. But, if you've really done something that's been sustained, perhaps you've been entrepreneurial in getting something started in your community or in this community, or something where you've made a difference in the IMSA community, then we really want to know about that. With activities and leaderships, it's not so much about the breadth as it is about the depth. So how in that experience have you made a difference? But listing every single time you've done something, no, don't do that. But it is important. We want it, again, it's about engagement, it's about curiosity, it's about being an avid learner and a contributor to the community.
Thank you very much. And now we welcome you to explore the wonderful colleges and universities in the main gym. We have over 100 schools represented this morning, so have a wonderful morning.